So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, everyone we have in the press center of Ukraine Crisis Media Center, all of you watching us. So this is another event we have in the Crisis Media Center, and another Ukrainian event to support Ukraine accessing NATO. Why am I saying that boldly? Because it's really hard to find right now among Ukrainian politicians. It's really hard to find among executives, starting from the president and government and parliament. It's hard to find those people who would stand against Ukraine joining the collective agreement system, NATO. I mean, this is a unique period in Ukraine's history when we have that kind of unity and huge support of this step from Ukrainian people. And it's unprecedented. And I can say not just the vast majority, but almost all of our citizens from different regions, they do support that. Of course, this is the result of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. And we do understand that after the victory, we definitely need to have joint defense, collective defense. Ukraine will not defend the eastern flank of NATO all the time alone, so we have to unite, merge our efforts. Before two summits, on the eve of two summits, by the way, we are optimists, but we are well-informed optimists, so we speak of two summits. Vilnius and Washington, like a piece of that way, we are paving. It's the most important, I guess, in the story of Ukraine joining the NATO. We have to use this window of opportunities. We have both to use it, Ukraine and NATO. Radically, conditions are changing radically. Every day, as heads of committees, we get these questions like, what's going to happen in Vilnius? What decisions shall be made? But the key question is, in my opinion, not the diplomatic language, like which signal that will be, not those specific issues we may solve, even not those additional steps, but these are extremely important when it comes to Ukraine's support and important for defense sector and for us finally to liberate our territories. The most important thing is like the key political decision to be made. And we would really like today again to concentrate your attention on this. It's of huge importance for us that we have this parliamentary dimension, as I call it. I'm saying not that Verkhovna Rada just exists, but we have this clearly articulated, the voice of parliament, and we're joining various announcements. We are creating announcements and messages, joint opinion, and defending this opinion abroad. Yes, we have the issue of reforming, internal reforming of the defense security sector. This is the homework we have to do. But representatives of committees from the parliament, heads of committees handling the external dimension, Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze, former Vice Prime Minister of European Integration. This is not OSCE but NATO, and now she is the head of the Parliamentary Committee on EU Integration. Oleksandr Merezhko. He is the head of Parliamentary Committee of Foreign Policy and Interparliamentary Cooperation. Basically, via the Parliamentary Assembly and through the interaction with colleagues, you've done so much within the last months just to approach this moment, approach us to it. And we know that these efforts are taken. So I have a question, and I'd like you in your speeches, please, try to touch upon this. Why Ukraine does need NATO? Why the NATO should actually take this historical decision? Maybe you can forecast when that's going to happen, this summit or the next one. So we always say, like, why do we need it in Ukraine? But we have some moments. But why NATO? Why this is the period, you know, and why we insist so much and we are very stubborn with these dates. You know, Ukrainians like saying now or never. So why it's happening? This is our political attitude, or it's just emotional, or we have some deep reasons for it. Ivanna, please. Thank you so much, Valeriy. I'm grateful to Ukraine Crisis Media Center. Again, you're raising this very important issue on the eve of important international events, but you also shape a deeper understanding for Ukrainians of certain processes that we face today. Truly, I'm so delighted, and we are delighted, that like a couple of years ago, something that seemed impossible, right now it's like a reality. We have the vast majority of Ukrainians who do support our membership in NATO and in European Union, both of these. And what it means that today, finally, politicians don't just have to take leadership in shaping this opinion, but relying on this, they have to promote the will of Ukrainian people. They have to push it forward. And today we have a lot of work being done at executive level and, of course, at parliamentary level, both, and at civic level. And all these three components, undoubtedly, this traditional and non-standard public diplomacy, all this should give a result. Just like we managed to get some result when we all were actively working to get the candidacy status for Ukraine's accession to EU. And I do truly believe that we'll manage to get this decision in 2023 to finally open the negotiations on membership in the EU by doing the part of our homework. And we'll, of course, continue lobbying this decision in the countries, in the capitals of EU member states. When it comes to NATO, when it comes to alliance, North Atlantic Alliance, why? I'll try to start answering your question, and then I'll come to other issues I'd like to stress on. So why do we consider that, why do we assume that without Ukraine's membership in the alliance, in future we can't talk about long-term and sustainable peace at European continent and global peace, to be honest? We do believe, we do think that leaving Ukraine a gray zone in future, leaving Ukraine beyond the military political alliance of the free world countries, this would be, in future, this would be, okay, despite that Ukraine will, Ukraine will definitely get its victory, but still, if Ukraine is left in gray zone, this will promote Russia somehow. It doesn't matter what Russia will look like after the defeat. This will promote Russia to restore its imperialistic, or revive its imperialistic intentions and its colonial intentions towards Ukraine. And within years, within decades, Russia will try to attack us again. In this case, as it seems to me, the free world countries, they will have to invest again and again at a maximum level to support Ukraine to withstand this aggression. At the same time, we do clearly observe with our own experience that Russia understands only the language of power and language of unity. And if Ukraine is a part of alliance, even this, even such a cynical thing as economic benefit of not investing that much in Ukrainian defense for our partners, you know, if they save money, this will be an argument, you know, for our membership in the alliance. It sounds cynical, but still. And we also do understand that Russia will not attack, will not even attempt to attack the alliance upon the condition of maintaining this unity and upon the condition of maintaining these, keeping these common values the alliance is built on. This is something that has to pave the way for Ukraine to North Atlantic Treaty. And to me, any conversations with other countries, any conversations with other structures or unions or treaties in future, after Ukraine joins NATO, all these conversations will be much more confident for the NATO itself. Not even mentioning all those things. Unfortunately, due to our experience, well, unfortunately, because we have very brutal and bloody experience that armed forces of Ukraine are gaining today, all our defense sector, there's a huge share of knowledge we can actually share with NATO countries today. We can share a lot, like the military tactics on how to counter cyber attacks, how to counter informational threats, effective countering, I mean, of course. Cyber informational threats based on those practices Ukraine has, at the expense, by the way, at the expense of civic society with their contribution as well, in civic sector, I mean. Just a couple of things to mention. When we think about our expectations and our hopes, when we try to put our arguments on the table for our partners regarding the decisions that should be taken definitely in Vilnius, as we think, and to avoid repetition, to avoid that dramatic mistake that already was made by Alliance in 2008 at Bucharest Summit. But move further go beyond the Bucharest Summit to get a clear formula how Ukraine will be joining the alliance in future. So when we put all that on the table, we have to understand that current counteraction, current opposition. So the opposition to this, the resistance to this historic decision is in two dimensions. We have to understand that we have to work with both of these. Partially, we can unfortunately say that still in some capitals of EU member states or NATO member states, to be specific, we have certain fear and concerns regarding the fact that the step on clear formula for Ukraine's membership in NATO, in future, in some way, this will provoke Russian Federation. Obviously, for us Ukrainians, it looks, how can we call it? It looks like stupid, completely stupid, because we do understand very well that Russia does not need any reason to be provoked. Russia is generating these reasons, is responding to these, and acts purely on the basis of its own assumptions or decisions. And it happens regardless of what's actually being done by the vis-a-vis. So we've seen Russia simply ignoring Finland's membership in NATO. No concerns basically are there for the NATO expansion. We saw here that Russia is not very concerned with Swedish way to NATO and Swedish accession to NATO. And the same thing goes if the political decision is made. Upon the condition that there is clear understanding of this formula regarding Ukraine, Russia will have to swallow this one as well and have to somehow reconcile the new reality. We just have to understand it. We have to bring this to those capitals where actually there is no such understanding still. This is one dimension. The other dimension I was talking about, we do know that today Ukraine is actively discussing and articulating it at all levels. That we do consider that us, just like Sweden and Finland, we can and we have to avoid the stage of action plan on membership provision. I agree with that, because the formula and the tool of membership action plan, it was generated in different conditions. It was formulated in different time, in different environment. Today, it simply may not be compliant to those countries who go through the political way of joining. But we should understand, if we compare Ukraine with Finland and Sweden, one thing to realize, unfortunately, not in all aspects, I'll sound very diplomatic, not in all aspects, Ukraine is interoperable with NATO countries, let's call it like that. And we sincerely, openly, and we can be proud. It's purely justified. We are proud of our defense sector of our armed forces, the only army in the world, within such a short period of time, with huge effectiveness, they mastered the use of various types of armament and weapons. NATO standard weapons, and we actually use it today, thanks to the support provided of our partners. We use it at the battlefields, but at the same time, we just have to realize that we still have a lot of homework. Serious homework that has to bring us to full interoperability with the alliance countries. From the standpoint of functioning, armed forces of Ukraine functioning, we speak about control, civic oversight, parliamentary oversight, oversight in terms of defense component functioning, I mean, and from the standpoint of launching the system of management, communication, liaison system within the armed forces, or again, the whole defense and security sector, we have to implement serious parliamentary and civic oversight and control. We have to go through transformation. It should be there for the security service. We have to transform our law enforcement structures. What is the aim of this? To be able to have the capacity to rely on that political way that I'm mentioning. Not even mentioning that the key, well, the foundation for the NATO member states to unite. So it's about free societies led by the rule of law, with democratic procedures, with the power balance. These are the things that are critically important for us to be a part of alliance, because we do see that NATO today, unfortunately, suffers from this. Some member states stopped adhering to the things they declared as their values at the beginning when they accessed the NATO, and they sometimes take NATO as a hostage. When it comes to principal things important for the strengthening and development of the NATO, when it comes to deployment of additional military capacities at the borderline, and these are the things that we should not ignore. I think that our task, what is our task? Even if the perfect decision is still not made, because the perfect one, okay, is about inviting us to the NATO at Vilnius. We know at Vilnius summit, we know that still there is no such formulation of this decision. We have to understand that Vilnius is not the final point in our lives, in NATO life, in our lives. So we have to continue this activity. So we need to take some of these political precautions away, put them away, something that may be used against this accelerated Ukraine's accession to NATO. I'm deeply convinced this is possible. I know there is readiness to work with that inside the country, and I would really love that, regardless of whether the NATO is presenting some additional requirements or doesn't do it, regardless of it, I really would love us to start working with that, taking closer look at other member states and, you know, setting some very high expectations by ourselves, you know, to our country, and not just relying on our armed forces, you know, heroic, brave, not just relying on their achievements, not thinking that only with their achievements we'll enter the NATO, that we can do it also at the expense of our political changes and transformations that we prioritize for ourselves here. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ivanna. How much should it, like a year, is that okay for parliamentary homework to reform the security service? Okay, Valeriy, we've lost 1.5 years since the full-scale invasion as minimum. This period is lost. Well, before we got the candidacy state, as far as I remember, in September, we submitted an application for membership in NATO, but during this period, at level of parliament, there wasn't any decision initiated, which would not just politically articulate the support of this decision, but there was no decision made to transform Ukraine in accordance with the NATO requirements, but we have these annual national programs within the last 2 years, like nobody was actually implementing these due to the war, but we know what the key requirements are. This is not the terra incognita at all. Obviously, we've lost a lot of time, and we'd been losing it previously. But if we want to do it, we can. If we see the perspective, if there is a horizon, Ukrainian politicians are like students. If they know that there are exams we have to pass, well, there is some active preparation, and like the very last night before the exam, you know, you start devouring some information and reading books and studying all the details, and you finally pass the exam on the next day. So I really want us all to set this task for ourselves, that this is the exam, we have to pass it right now. Yeah, 1 year, okay. I do believe that, yeah, yes, that would be, yeah, okay. Truly something that happened. It's already passed. There's no reverse movement, unfortunately, so we can't go to past. We have to try to change anything we can now. The same question, I guess, goes to representative of the ruling party in the parliament. So, Oleksandr, how do you assume? If we'll try to accelerate this with the draft laws approved by NATO. Okay, this is not your committee. We have a special committee for it. For example, if we adopt these draft laws, the second thing, if this is an obstruction for the political decision first, like the invitation first, and then we understand that, okay, like it will take time and we'll have some time for implementation. Okay. Okay. We first have to get this political will or political decision. Ukraine already proved its capacity, its strength. It's it's a really important part for the NATO. You made some reframing by the way we use this in communication when we communicate with our Western partners as well. We try to convince them using this argument that for the NATO, Ukraine is... NATO needs us just like we need NATO, okay? So a couple of arguments, there are a couple of reasons for it. First of all, I do fully agree with Miss Ivanna's words. And by the way, one of the Western politicians says approximately this like that in English. This is one of the lessons we had to learn within the last like 5-10 years. And it sounds like that. Gray areas a great green light for aggression. What does it mean? So what we finally realize, and finally NATO states realize, that the uncertainty zone, strategic, geopolitical, this gray zone, promotes, it gives additional motives and incentives for potential aggressor. It's luring a potential aggressor. So we really need Ukraine joining NATO as fast as we can. That's what we should. And this is the national interest of the NATO member states as well. It's in their interest. So I tell our partners also that we have to look at Ukraine. Please don't consider us to be a problem, but we are the solution of the problem. Because Ukraine's accession to NATO, fast accession, helps to create the complete collective defense system in Europe and global system, of course. It's really important. Secondly, Ukraine demonstrated that for us, European values, European security architecture, European security is not just some empty words. We are actually fighting for it. We're giving our lives. We're defending that system. So our accession will definitely strengthen and enhance NATO. This would be a new push, let's say, some new energy, some new impetus, which will definitely strengthen NATO and its role as a defense alliance, as an alliance which task is to defend and ensure security. Basically, another issue of geostrategic one for the future. We understand that now Russian Empire, it doesn't matter how it's called actually, it's Russian Empire or the Soviet Union or Russian Federation, but the essence still is the same. It's a very aggressive empire. They are declining. Russian Federation is in decline, and we'll have a very difficult period when we'll have a trend strengthening for this empire to decline. We have to ready for it to break down. Russia will do it. So that's why Ukraine has to become a full member of NATO. We have these arguments and we express those. We defend these. Just a couple of words. Also, Ivanna mentioned that. It's a very important thing. And our expectations. I do think of this as, it looks like a scale to me. You know, the bottom part of the scale, we can say at some point that open door policy, you know, very abstract formula, very abstract formulation. Our task is to get something much more serious, much stronger than this open door policy, something more solid. This formulation that emerged at the Bucharest summit in 2008. Our perfect option, of course, is the invitation. Our best option. I always give this example, what I really loved, resolution of Estonian parliament. And they clearly said that they expect to grant invitation for Ukraine actually to get this invitation. We do fight. We try to stay realistic, all right. But the fight continues, and we do think that this fight continues till the last minute. We don't know what the formulation will be. What is a very positive indicator, as for me, the fact that the statement on that Ukraine should get a very clear way to NATO or clear algorithm to access the NATO. This statement was joined by representatives of parliaments of 21 NATO member state. What is it? Clear way. What is that? Basically, what do I mean? As far as I understand, this is the formulation backed by the following. What's the core of it? A principal political decision, a clear political decision should be made that Ukraine becomes a member of NATO. The modality may be subject to discussion and timing, let's say, when and how, but there must be a clear political decision made. Very solid decision that Ukraine will become the member of NATO. I mean the formulation, what should be in the formulation. Second thing, a little bit of linguistic, legal issue like the guarantees. What do we have to get before Ukraine becomes a full member of NATO? And we insist on use of guarantees definition. But there is certain resistance to it, like the latest report in The Economist, the latest paper in The Economist, like about Ukraine's accession to NATO. What's in that paper? Some American politicians are afraid of guarantees as a word because it has very powerful legal context and connotation. It's about legal commitments, first of all. And we may get other definitions of it, like arrangements. We already had that, or commitments. Again, there is certain linguistic fight in that a fight in linguistic legal dimension. But in the whole bunch of documents, including the Declaration of the Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, they use guarantees as a word. So we have to insist that at Vilnius summit, for them to use guarantees as a key definition. This is really important for us. And it's pretty clear that under these guarantees, it's a matter of discussion, the content. Specific content. What is specifically meant? I understand that we are allies, thinking that these guarantees we need to get from the nuclear NATO member states. This is of huge importance for us, this principle. Again, I repeat, the fight goes on, and we use all possible mechanisms, interparliamentary cooperation mechanisms, to convince our partners, our allies, first of all the US, of course, because a lot depends on their will, but we do understand that decisions are made based on consensus. For the US, it's really important to support that consensus still. For the formulation, the final formulation, to be backed by consensus. Again, the fight goes on, and it's continued. I'm pretty optimistic. And meeting with the Chinese ambassador in Washington and the state secretary's visit and the third country opinion may actually somehow affect the US on Vilnius, in terms of Vilnius. I do hope that this will not affect the US opinion. In what sense? It's clear that United States, America, and China, they have their own story. They have their own interaction. But I'm pretty sure that, first of all, we have to be led by interests, actual national interests of the NATO states and the US. Chinese opinion, at least officially, they don't express any specific opinion regarding Ukraine's membership in NATO. At least I haven't seen anything anywhere. They always formulate their opinions and statements in a very abstract way. You can't even understand what they mean. Thank you. Thank you, Oleksandr. Thank you so much. I would like to express my opinion as well, if you do allow me, from a different perspective. That's why I'm grateful for the arguments you've presented, and many of these are contained in the joint statement of the CSOs, 70 of them. There are other arguments, but I just want to say that what happens if there is no political decision to invite Ukraine to NATO? I mean, in Vilnius or a little bit later in Washington, the maximum point, but I think the window of opportunities is this. I'm pretty sure, I'm convinced that we heard today that Parliament will be able to accelerate. If previously something was slowing down, if there is a clear vision, political vision, I think that finally we'll have to do things which are simple and obvious. Take the functions of economic oversight, take these away from the security service and leave something they have, like counterintelligence, special operations forces. This is logical. It's explained only, you know, by you know what. So, a very simple decision. Amending the law by the parliament, and it's a tough decision for the president. Finally solve it, because the security service is subordinated to them. And we can check the programs and solutions and decisions. I've read these. These programs are in effect by 2024, 2025. We can accelerate these. Many of those aspects and issues, they may generate doubts when it comes to our partners, something that may be like a loophole for them, you know, for ratification of different member states, it may be. But I'll give my personal opinion. You may hit the wall with your head, but you will not convince Orban, Siarto as well. You will never convince them that it's fine with national minorities in Ukraine and there is no turbulence. They use this argument. I don't know what else they will present. They start saying that they have to take Georgia. Okay. They are sitting on a hook. We know whose hook that is. I'm now talking. This statement goes to key players. France changing the approach with Macron, Chancellor Scholz. We can see it, and there was a quantum leap made by him when he started evaluating the role of Germany. United Kingdom, with its very fixed, clear attitude, like, look at our neighbors, Baltic states, Slovakia, Romania. These are countries that right now, they are supporting the Ukraine's invitation to NATO. But what happens if their voice is not heard? What happens if the US, even in the year of election is a very important component of all this geopolitical concert, let's call it. We should not forget about it. Even if it's not done in this year, if it's not be presented as an achievement of Joseph Biden, I'll be surprised. This would be like this could be presented there as an achievement, inviting Ukraine to NATO as a logical step, showing the power, showing the strength, not the weakness. Step by step, what will happen when it comes to NATO development? NATO will show its weakness first. Putin's blackmail was aimed to that, for NATO to become indecisive. First, indecisive actions with Finland and Sweden. Then the decisive steps, clear steps, and US leadership, by the way, at the first stage. Then some doubts that there are countries which will not ratify instantly. But it happened with Finland and Sweden, eventually. Everybody do understands, with the Turkey, with the Hungary, the alliance states, understand that the defense of their states and citizens is the priority. They all see what's happening, what's prioritized in the world. NATO will show weakness if Ukraine is not invited by it. In opposite case, showing strength and pushing the blackmailing away. This will be an additional element of the structure of peace formula approved by Ukraine. So this will complement definitely this peace formula. I would offer Volodymyr Zelensky to complement the peace formula with NATO membership. Just put it as one of the provisions. Okay. No invitation to Ukraine, no decision, gray zone, weakness, aggressors, activation. We've had that. Bucharest, there was no decision. Georgia war. Putin takes this as an invitation for further aggression, to expand aggression and his circles. When it comes to Ukraine and Ukrainian events, we'll have a situation, we'll search for a solution. The votes in Ukraine, you know, some opinions, the voice in Ukraine to get the nuclear weapon will be louder. Dirty nuclear weapons, whatever. Those who give these statements will get support from voters because nothing to defend. No collective security, and Ukraine starts doing anything to defend the country, protect the country without getting the partners' approval. By the way, Henry Kissinger actually mentioned this. He used to be kind of consistent supporter of neutrality, NATO non-membership, and many of other homemade strategists used Kissinger's words that we have to be neutral, like no NATO, no signals to Russia. No negative signals. And eventually Kissinger, now he seems to be more flexible and wise in analytics. He's a very flexible brain, much more flexible than our stupid statements given for so many years. And we still have these supporters of these stupid statements, everything that led to the war, you know, staying beyond the blocks, giving the basis to Russia. Like, we could have made these mistakes. But only, yeah, stupid people make mistakes 3 times. So I picked the word stupid. It's not diplomatic, but it's the only way we can explain it. We tried everything. We tried the formula, Russian formula of compromise. We gave everything, and there was an agreement putting that in the constitution. Crimean bases, like, it didn't work. Second thing we picked, second step, staying beyond the blocks, you know, de facto, we have de facto had the country beyond the blocks. In 2014, look at that, we had the attack. In 2014, there were no discussions on joining anything, but look what happened. After that, Ukraine, unfortunately, well, now we have these radical ideas will just grow, and attitudes will grow and expand. Unfortunately, of skepsis as well, and negative to NATO. We may get some opinions on the society as it used to be in Soviet times. You know, the Soviet mentality, the Soviet type evaluation of NATO, and poor implementation. They'll start mentioning those stories. We had like various NATO statements will be refreshed. I'm giving my own opinion because I've seen this. In 2019, when suddenly the NATO supporters, our bureaucrats at top positions started saying, we don't need NATO. These are the people, my colleagues, who took ministerial positions, presidential advisors right now. In 2019, somehow they suddenly started saying, oh, maybe you don't need NATO. I think that's like a game. It looks like a game, you know. And this game is continued right now. So I do... my attitude is... I'm trying to be very diplomatic with Zelensky's statements, like he may go or not go to the summit. Like, of course, he has to go there. We need that. But it's just a demonstration that we have these attitudes, that we may have this bargaining, like the narrative, if you don't want to take us to NATO, we'll take another way. Which way? Nobody understands. If previously this was a model of integration in another direction, now Russia cut it off completely. So we are in a situation when we have to push the model of unilateral defense with smaller resources. It leads us to a very complicated situation. Ukraine will not develop then for dozens of years and just will waste all of our resources for defense and to mitigate the attacks from Russia and other neighbors. For other neighbors, this may become even more acute. We may have the tension and conflicts in this situation. Non-perception of Ukraine. This is not my opinion, but we have such assessment. Even now we have these statements with neighboring countries which are NATO members. And honestly, we speak of Hungary today. There are concerns that definitely it's better to stay together inside and to use the same rules, the same aims, instead of being between two sides of the defense border, and nobody knows how these interests will clash. So, in Kissinger's opinion, Ukraine should be in NATO. I say, yes, I agree with that. And this is his opinion. And then Ukraine will control... Then Ukraine will be controlled better, not to have purely autonomous steps taken, but will get the approval on defense steps from the NATO states. I don't know why Kissinger starts thinking that will become like... I don't know why Kissinger thinks we will provoke someone, but okay. Another thing related to elite attitudes. Okay, you don't take us to NATO, then there will be no reforms. There'll be no steps. It may happen. We've had that. We've had that. It's like these reforms are like... it's clear that in this case, the way to NATO is stimulating. But this, if impetus vanishes, then it will be harder. It's not in the interest of Ukraine society. Another important thing. If we are not the NATO member, we'll not get enough data, a real-time mode, intelligence data. A lot of steps are taken during the Russian-Ukrainian war, but the level of information provision does not correspond to our needs. If we were a member, that would be different. In NATO, they have like their rules for exchanging the information. All those NATO weapons we already have in the territory, it would be pretty logical for that experience, that practices, that armament to be used jointly. It's obvious that something what was mentioned by Oleksandr on nuclear guarantees. I'd say I consider that without a bilateral agreement, defense agreement with a nuclear country, we can't avoid this. We won't move far without it. Ukraine, and moreover, Ukraine as one of the options will have to search for alliances, but smaller, but with those countries who are ready to work in the same defense system. We have those countries. We have some political formats which already are mentioned. One of the reasons why today these are not actively developed, and Poland, Ukraine, United Kingdom, and Lublin Triangle, I think one of the reasons not to crush this NATO unity in general with the US, which is our ally. If this construction, if the structure declines and Ukraine will not be a cementing factor for the North Atlantic, transatlantic cooperation, then it seems that we will find, we will survive And we will not even care for the NATO breakage. Maybe NATO's destiny will be the same as for Western European Union, alternative to NATO, but in 2011 it ceased its existence. I even visited their HQ. Wonderful premise. Military stuff, and then like, why? Because in this case, without the US, they couldn't create an alternative, and they won't do it without Ukraine. Why? Without Ukraine, they won't be able to do it. Not because I hear these calls that Ukraine shall deploy its well-trained warriors, defenders, to defend NATO around the perimeter. No, it's an incorrect approach. We should not become a military force donor. No, we have to take a commitment, joint commitment, on European defense and security, and with some of our neighboring countries to enhance the borders with the nuclear countries. I mean, and I agree that the land component and well-trained army, this is a serious element, and we have some strategic aims, joint aims with NATO, which makes us strategic partners. We've never had these before. What does that mean? Such aims which can't be achieved without a partner. I think neither Ukraine can hold the security for a long time without partners, nor the NATO can do it under these conditions. Well, that simple reason, I want to hear it from at least one expert, NATO expert. Can they give 1 million of people at the front line, put 1 million army, you know, towards the rifles, to 3,000 kilometers of the front line? They don't even still understand how can you get 1 million of deeply motivated people ready to die for their countries, trained, well-trained, experienced, educated, who can professionally... Well, they can, you know, boast a lot, but they haven't passed the test. NATO haven't passed the test in terms of direct attack, just the cyber maybe. And all that weakness, when Russian missiles were falling at NATO territory, when Russian aircraft is teasing the NATO airspace, they are still trying to enhance the power. This is imminent. This is imminent. Sooner or later, Russia will still... These are Russians. Medvedev says that Ukraine and Finland were established by Lenin. They live in their own world, you know, so this is a parallel universe. They will tease, they will cross the border. When they find a loophole, they will start teasing NATO and attacking NATO. And at that moment, we have to be together. That's when we are strong. And just to finish, I'll give you my own opinion, ladies and gentlemen, maybe why Vilnius will not be that optimistic as we really want it to be. There wasn't a mistake, but we changed our approach that we successfully implemented before. We got the visa-free regime, candidacy status. We started appealing to bureaucrats. We started talking to politicians, purely. In this case, not the parliaments, because parliaments express the will of people. To executives, executive power bodies like presidents, prime ministers, and concentrate our efforts on that. This is wrong. We have to appeal to people, to societies, to parliaments of these countries, and each politician in each country must now put it on the table. Just 2 columns of figures. First, the level of Ukraine's membership in NATO, how well it's supported. Second, the decision of the parliament. If these 2 decisions, the majority and the decision of the parliament, if these are positive, then this politician has to dismiss by Washington summit. Ukraine in 2023 has to lobby it among the people, among the citizens. It doesn't matter how... the management will perceive you. This is not for executives. Executive power bodies must constantly interact with partners. This is the task for Ukrainian civic society, for activists, for the parliament at some point, to express the opinion of people. I think that this component, despite the fact that civic society is giving some statements, specific events, unfortunately, we still don't have this interaction of this sector, non-governmental sector, with the president, Volodymyr Zelensky, with the government, as we had it when we really wanted to get other effective decisions. Our state power should think of it. If presidential opinion, if it's supported by everyone around him, if yes, okay, let us unite. Vilnius is not the final point. I agree with Ivanna. It's not the final point. We have time, but I think that this time is not enough still. 2023, I think, but Washington summit will be delayed, maybe for 2.5 months. I don't know, but still, like July 2024, we have a year for it. Still, I'd like to share the optimism of Mr. Merezhko and Miss Ivanna's as well. Yes, Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze is optimistic as well. They want to hear it at Vilnius summit. I don't know. I think that there should be a bridge, a certain bridge between us finally built. And we really don't want all these issues to be closed by some substitution, like an NATO-Ukraine Council. So we are done with the formulations. Okay? If we don't send the signal, correct signal to Kremlin, to Putin, after Vilnius or during the Vilnius, this will be really dangerous. The proper signal, the correct signal, may become an additional stone laid in the foundation for effective frontline activities and operations. If NATO countries don't want to do it, then they won't give us a chance to save lives. The final thing to mention, if I don't hear at Vilnius after Vilnius, if I don't hear that they give the long distance 300 km missiles, German or ATACMS, I don't know, then I'll be so disappointed. Not just I will be disappointed, but many Ukrainians will be, because we don't have enough of that armament. We don't have enough of those weapons. And the formula, they sounded that we have enough of all for counter-defense, for counter-offensive. No, we don't have enough of that. We're entitled to get more. If someone is playing the games, stop it. Ukraine, at least at Vilnius, must get ATACMS missiles, long-range missiles, to defend the country and to deoccupy the country. I'm not even mentioning the aircraft. It's already, it's taking too long. Okay, this is the critical, let's say, opinion of the civic society. Just to finish. One question, I guess, I'll ask. You may answer, you may not, just as you want to. A very simple question. Regardless of this criticism, okay, so we've had this very tough diplomatic way paved. What is your attitude to such idea, such opinion given by the president? Okay, his doubts, like whether should I go to Vilnius or not? What is your attitude to it? This statement, like the office actually confirmed that he's like thinking whether he should go or not to Vilnius summit. From the standpoint of pragmatic opinion. So for our successful way, what should president stick to and the executive power branch? I'll say this. From the standpoint of political and psychological, well, the very formulation, like should I go or not, depending on the result, this is proper when it comes to psychology. But at the same time, he still has to go. He still has to go. We just have to remember that it's not us who are the first country accessing NATO with such difficulties and problems. Remember Poland, okay? Richard Pipes historian, you know, a prominent historian, and Reagan's advisor was against because Poland, well, he was against Poland becoming a part of NATO. Lithuania and other countries had difficulties. We are not the first one who are paving that complicated way who will face those challenges. But it's really important for these challenges to give us energy, to motivate us, to make more attempts, and not to just disappoint and be discouraged. It's pretty diplomatic, Ivanna. I'd like to respond to one thing you mentioned about it, ATACMS. Long-range weapons, and I just want to tell you instantly, at Vilnius and during Vilnius summit, nobody is going to give it to us. Just you just have to understand this. Please don't get overexcited. With the NATO decisions, this will not be given, but the Rammstein may give it, like maybe simultaneously with Vilnius, more or less. Okay, let us set some very realistic goals, achievable goals, because we know that NATO is actually not giving us the weapons. It's working the other way. So I do agree that we need ATACMS, and I remember me and my colleagues, this was a female delegation to the US, end of March, beginning of April 2022. I guess this was our first parliamentary diplomatic trip. Kyiv was half surrounded by Russian troops at that moment, and then we started talking about F-16. This was a very complicated discussion at the level of Pentagon, we can say, in this finally. When the decisions are made, they tried to convince us, no, you don't need aircraft. This was very emotionally hard discussion. It was a painful conversation. We understand that, unfortunately, that decision that was clear to us then, a year of postponement, and for pilots to be trained. That decision was postponed for a year almost, even more than a year. Remember the saga about the tanks? It costs our lives. We pay with our lives and destroyed settlements, destroyed territories. We pay with this. This is the price. It will be so hard for us to recover these. In the broadest sense of recover, what I mean. When it comes to, participation of president and the approach, his ambiguous statement. Okay, I absolutely dislike the blackmailing policy. I stand against this. I oppose. We have other arguments. We have very convincing arguments. In the situation we are, in the actions we are capable of performing, it's not something that should force us to use blackmailing attitude and policy. Quite often I hear this phrase. I recently heard this phrase so often. There was an interview, March or February 2021, when President gave an interview to one of American media. In this interview, he said that, my question would be to Biden, why we are still not the member of NATO. This was a provocative question. He had to ask himself. At that moment, he had to ask himself. There was no clear understanding then at all levels inside the country. Despite the fact that NATO and EU membership is in Constitution, is enshrined in Constitution, there was no understanding that this was the only way for our safe future. So I would really like us to avoid those provocative steps as much as we can, but focus mostly on the use of actual arguments, on systemic work at all levels, starting from the president and then government, parliament, and to the civic society. I do support what you say, Valeriy, that there is a need for interaction and maximum involvement of civic society. Before this conversation, I took part in the joint meeting of the civic society platform, EU-Ukraine, and there I mentioned that unfortunately today we still don't use at the proper level the potential of CSOs. They are not present at decision-making level. They don't analyze these decisions. They don't process. They don't give offers. That's where we are losing. You know, we just we underperform here. This immense power, this professionalism and knowledge and expertise, and this power of initiatives, it should be used at a maximum point to achieve the goals and give us safe life, give finally a prosperous country and society, and with protected rights, right to life, first of all, and other rights and freedoms as well. Thank you so much. Thank you. If you allow me, I'll specify with the missiles. Why am I saying this? I do understand that this is this decision is made by Rammstein, maybe already made, so we do not need additional. We already have British weapon of that type. But we speak of specific countries right now which have to join. Obviously, the US has the most capacity, not just ATACMS, other types are there. We have various solutions. Germans do have such items. I think that Vilnius platform can be used for political announcement to be made, that it would be logical, because it's like it should be there now, because we can't wait anymore. The political decision, we all know that the White House should say it, because all the preparatory steps, Congress, the Pentagon, all the statements were made, but Joseph Biden should decide. I would be so surprised if this would not be announced by the American president soon. What is soon? What's gonna happen soon? Like Vilnius summit. The participation, well, my idea is like between yours, both of yours, that diplomatic games may allow usage of this tool, like participation, non-participation of a certain party, but not quite often we've had this chance to demonstrate our subjectivity like now. Now we can definitely use it, because Ukraine's non-participation in Vilnius summit weakens drastically the impression of the summit, but not the NATO, but impression of the summit. This would be a bad signal. What I do not perceive radically, when president uses this publicly, you know, acting like that with the president, you know, this why it's not done at the level of those responsible for foreign policy? Why Volodymyr Zelensky has to present those radical statements, you know, absolutely non-constructive, because such public announcements are very dangerous and threatening. It's damaging. Some discussions at the level of like the presidential office with a lot of diplomatic capacity, this should be done behind the closed doors, and just putting president in such a strange position. Well, I'm pretty sure that in any situation, what we see today, Ukraine should be, of course, at the level of president presented at Vilnius summit, undoubtful. This is our goal that we announced at the highest level. It's supported by everyone. I do think that we will have a lot of questions if suddenly someone advises the president not to go to summit, but this is my subjective opinion. The only thing that the executives, the parliament, the diplomatic corps, you know, for the civic society, for those abroad to finally hear our voice, and I want them to hear us in Washington. It's a little bit sad for me that the US used to be the driver in Bucharest, and France and Germany blocked it then, and right now I'd like to have more of political will from the US. I think that this is like a tricky thing to make the summit, Washington summit, historic. Not to put everything into Vilnius, yes, but to take some steps to put the bridge. But in Washington, they will actually, at the anniversary summit, they will present this. This is my own assessment of these maneuvers that we still have in the capital. Yes, we have a year actually to do it. So we have a year for our homework. Yeah, this is the logic, because basically with the political will and specific actions, we can do it. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. Another brick is set in the foundation, so we are about to... Please, we'll wait for the results. No exaggerated expectations, but our patience, look what's there at the front line. Despite any standards, despite any tactics, with smaller capacities, we are cutting out the territories. Well, the aircraft, without the long-range missiles, we're just cutting the land with our teeth, you know, from the enemy's hands. And that's how we shall ensure our security. Without collective scheme, in these conditions, it would be really doubtful. So thank you for attention. I really want us all to get the result we are striving for. We expect them. Thank you.